an embassy to Sparta and asked that Lysander be made admiral, declaring that they would grapple much more vigorously with the situation. If he were their commander, because they all wanted Lysander, like Spartans wanted Lysander, Cyrus, this is Cyrus, who also sent to make the same request. Now, Lacedaemonians had a law forbidding that the same man should be admiral twice, and yet they wished to gratify their allies. They therefore invested a certain Arachus with the title of admiral and sent out Lysander as a vice admiral, nominally, but really with the supreme power. So you see, everybody wanted him back because they trusted him. He was a celebrated Navarch at the time. So, and as far as this Callicratidas, he actually did win a naval. He had a naval victory over the Athenian admiral Conon against the sizable Athenian force. And then he met this force in what they call Battle of Arginoso in 406 BC, and his force was soundly defeated, and Callicratidas himself was killed in that battle. And then after his death, Lysander returned from Sparta to take the post of Navarch or vice Navarch, but that was the idea. Okay. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Paul, you want to read this?
Sure, but I wanted to comment before you did.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
The part the part that I found really interesting was what Lysander did in Ephesus, which was you kind of jumped over that because he came in and built this network of rulers to be by bringing people from all of the cities and picking out, according to Plutarch, the ones that were most bold, and telling them to organize themselves into groups of 10 who would be the rulers of their cities after Lysander succeeded in driving away the Athenians. So he built essentially a political network in all of these Ionian cities that was ready to immediately seize power when the Athenians fell. And at the same time, Plutarch credits him with stimulating the economy in Ephesus, right? And I can't remember exactly what it was that he did that, but he started some purchasing and opened it for trade and got credit for kind of the beginning of the rise of Ephesus, which had been a pretty small and mean place before that. So he had these huge accomplishments that were, I think, really remarkable.
Okay. Before you start reading, because now we're going to talk about the last battle of the Peloponnesian War. It's very important. I actually found a very good map that actually shows you this whole thing. So you see, this is the Thracian Chersonese or Gallipoli, what we know it currently. This is the Dardanelles Strait or Hellespont, right? This is Sea of Marmara. And what's important here, this is where the Troy is supposedly located. And this battle takes place in this Hellespont. And what's important, the battle takes place here in Aigos Potamoi. It's a small place. It's not even like a city. However, the important city is, because you will see as you read it, is the Lampsacus. This is the area where Lysander fleet occupied that area, right? And then the Athenian fleet actually stayed here, but their supplies were in Sestos. This is the other important area where they stayed, but then they just came and stayed just the opposite of Lysander's fleet. However, you know, that's, you will see in that thing, even again, Alcibiades, who was already retired, he realized that they're at great danger because while Lysander fleet is right next to the city, it's full of supplies and everything. The Athenians are way away from the city. They have to go over there and back, you know, to bring supplies, and that would create a problem. So anyway, let's just read this piece here about this battle.
Okay, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Finding the Hellespont unguarded, he himself attacked Lampsacus from the sea with his ships, while Thorax, cooperating with the land forces, assaulted the walls. He took the city by storm and gave it to his soldiers to plunder. Meanwhile, the Athenian fleet of 180 triremes had just arrived at Elaeus in the Chersonese, and learning that Lampsacus had fallen, they straightway put in at Sestos. There they took in provisions and then sailed along to Hygospotami, over against their enemies who were still on station at Lampsacus. The Athenians were under the command of several generals, among whom was Philocles, the man who had recently persuaded the people to pass a decree that their prisoners of war should have the right thumb cut off, that they may not be able to wield a spear, though they might ply an oar. At this juncture, Alcibiades, who was living in his own fortress on the Chersonese, rode up to the Athenian army and censured the generals, first for having pitched their camp in a bad and even dangerous place on an open beach where there was no roadstead, and second, for the mistake of getting their provisions from distant Sestos, when they ought to sail round the coast a little way to the harbor and city of Sestos, where they would be at a longer remove from their enemies, who lay watching them with an army commanded by a single man, the fear of whom led it to obey his every order promptly. These were the lessons he gave them, but they would not receive them. And Tydeus actually gave him an insolent answer, saying that he was not general now, but others.
So you see, they, you know, send Alcibiades away, but Alcibiades was a great general, and he saw their weakness, that they are in a close proximity to this is the city that Lysander took, and they're in a close proximity, but their supply is, they have to go to Sestos and bring back. So they're not well supplied. They're in danger. So they kind of in a weak position. So the next thing, I just want to make sure you look at this map and really get it. You know, this is Sestos. That's where the Athenians getting provisions, but their main fleet is right here, that Hygospotami, while the Lysander's Spartan fleet is right at Lampsacus. They took the city and they have all the provisions right where they are.
Yeah,
of course, that's
one comment, Greg.
Yeah.
One of the consequences of this long line of supply meant that the Athenians would disperse and have to go through the countryside to gather things, because things were scarce, and we'll see that that plays a big part in what happens.
Exactly. Okay. So now this is this is the description of the battle. This is the last battle of the Second Peloponnesian War. Okay, anyone want to volunteer reading it?
I can take it.
Sure, thanks.
When therefore the shield was hoisted on the lookout ships, and the trumpet on the admiral's ship signaled the attack, the ships sailed forth, and the land forces ran their fastest along the shore to seize the promontory. The distance between the two continents at this point is 15 furlongs, and such was the zealous ardor of the rowers that it was quickly consumed. Conon, the Athenian general, who was the first to see from the land the onset of the fleet, suddenly shouted orders to embark, and deeply stirred by the threatening disaster, called upon some, besought others, and forced others to man the triremes. But his eager efforts were of no avail, since the men were scattered. For just as soon as they had embarked, since they expected no trouble, since as soon as they disembarked, since they expected no trouble, some went to market, some walked about the country, some lay down to sleep in their tents, and some began to get their suppers ready, being as far as possible removed from any thought of what was to happen through the inexperience of their commanders. The shouts and splashing oars of the oncoming enemy were already heard when Conan, with 8 ships, sailed stealthily away, and making his escape, proceeded to Cyprus, to Avagoras. But the Peloponnesians fell upon the rest of the ships, some of which they took entirely empty, and others they disabled while their crews were still getting aboard. And the men, coming up unarmed and in straggling fashion, perished at their ships, or if they fled by land, their enemies who had disembarked slew them. Lysander took 3,000 men prisoners together with their generals and captured the whole fleet, excepting the Perilous and the ships that had made their escape with Conan. So after plundering his enemy's camp and taking their ships in tow, he sailed back to Lampsacus, to the sound of pipes and hymns of victory. He had wrought a work of the greatest magnitude with the least toil and effort, and had brought to a close in a single hour a war which in length and the incredible variety of its incidents and fortunes surpassed all its predecessors.
Okay, you see, so that's exactly what happened. Let me see what I have. Well, before we go, let's look at the map again. So you see what happened? They were like scattered, but they were close. Now, I looked it up. Furlong is equivalent to Roman stadium, which is about 600 feet. So 15 furlongs would be probably like 3 kilometers, or maybe like 2 miles, something like this. This is the whole distance. It's like less than 2 miles. They could actually see, Lysander actually saw, the state of their fleet, that their ships were empty. I mean, that's why he chose the right time for attack. That was the danger, because they were right in their vision, but they had to scatter to get supplies, and he took advantage of it. And he had a great victory with minimal losses, and that actually was the end. So the Athenian fleet had 180 ships. I mean, they also kind of felt that they have a safety in numbers, because it was very large fleet, and that's really was their main problem. I mean, they didn't really they didn't really cared about the Alcibiades advice. So so actually some of the fleet often sailed to Sestus to get some provisions there. Some went to the smaller villages around. So that's really, so now there are I also looked, there are, besides this description, there are 2 other accounts of battle exist. So one goes from Diodorus Siculus, and he relates that Athenian generals in command of the 5th day at Sestus, Philocles sailed out with 30 ships, ordering the rest to follow him. And then also, that's one of the other theories, description of the battle. And then also, the Harvard professor Donald Kagan also argued that the Athenian strategy must have been to draw Peloponnesian into attack on a small force, so that the larger force could surprise them but that's another one. But the small force was immediately defeated, and the remainder of the fleet was caught unprepared on a beach. So that's the Donald Kagan theory of how the battle went, that the 30 ships went to draw them into the battle, but the whole Spartan fleet was prepared, and they defeated them very quickly, and before the main fleet could organize, they fell upon them. Kind of like similar description. So also Xenophon,
on that,
yeah,
Plutarch has some other details that really flesh out this character of Lysander, and because it's a sucker punch, right?
Yeah.
Lysander 4 times comes out and meets the Athenian fleet. Everybody's expecting them to engage, and then he turns around and he sails back. And he goes the same thing the next day, the same thing the next day. And then the 4th time is when, as the Athenians turned back home and he turned back to Lampsacus, they turned right around and then attacked the Athenians. So it was after 4 days of luring them and getting them, unvigilant. And that's the inexperience. They just didn't take it seriously.
Yep. Okay.
And I just think, it's all a comment on the Athenian democracy. I mean, that's why there were these inexperienced commanders out there. That's why Alcibiades was not out there, where he actually was a match for Lysander.
Right.
They slit their own throats.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody wants to read this one?
I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Lysander, after the 3,000 Athenians whom he had taken prisoners had been condemned to death by the special council of allies, Lysander sailed to the various cities and ordered all the Athenians whom he met to go back to Athens. For he would spare none, he said, but would slaughter any whom he caught outside the city. He took his discourse and drove them all into the city of...
I'm sorry, it's accidentally slipped. Yeah, go ahead, apologize.
Drove them all into the city together, because he wished that scarcity of food and the mighty famine should speedily afflict the city, in order that they might not hinder him by holding out against his siege with plenty of provisions. He also suppressed the democratic and the other forms of government, and left one Lacedaemonian Harmast in each city, and 10 rulers chosen from the political clubs which we had organized throughout the cities.
So Harmast is the Spartan governor. That's the name. That's how they used to call Harmast. So now you could see how at this point he is a major figure. He has control. Athens defeated. They have no longer fleet. That was their last reserve, and now all the cities are falling prey to him, and he is destroying their democratic rules, establishing a Spartan governor, and choosing some people to that are loyal to him to support his cause. Okay, so all right, I'll read this one. And now, when he learned that the people of Athens were in a wretched plight from famine, he sailed into Piraeus and reduced the city, which was compelled to make terms on the basis of his command. It is true that one hears it said by Lacedaemonians that Lysander wrote to Ephors, thus, he wrote it thus to Ethan: Athens is taken, and that the Ephors wrote back to Lysander, taken were enough. But this actual story was invented for its neatness sake, yeah, laconic style, right? The actual decree of Ephors ran thus. This is what Lacedaemonians authority have decided. Tear down the Piraeus and the long walls, quit all the cities, and keep to your own land. So when Athenians had yielded in all points, Lysander sent for many flute girls from the city and assembled all those who were already in the camp, and then tore down the walls and burned up the triremes to the sound of the flute, while the allies crowned themselves with garlands and made merry together, counting the day of that day as the beginning of their freedom. Then, without delay, he also made changes in the form of government, establishing 30 rulers in the city and 10 in Piraeus. Further, he put a garrison into Acropolis and made Calibius a Spartan its foremost. So that's what he did to the Athens. So this is the painting showing Athens and its walls being demolished. You know, these are the walls. This is, you know, so that was, as you know, there was the wall around the city, and then there was a long wall that goes all the way to the Athenian port of Piraeus, and the Piraeus also was surrounded. So it's like Piraeus is a smaller city at the time, connected by the long walls to the Athens. Okay, any comments? Anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, one thing. There's something that I think that Plutarch doesn't mention, and I think he must figure that the audience takes it for granted, which is that Athens depended for really the entirety of its grain supply upon the colonies on the Black Sea. So the real significance of this victory by Lysander was that it cut Athens from its source of food. So when he said, well, he sent them back to, to make more people hungry in the city, what's underlying it is that he's basically wiped out their food supply and they must starve to death. The war is over at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So any volunteers to read this piece?
I can read it.
Okay.
Now the leading man, and to his equals, the ambition of Lysander was annoying, merely, but since, owing to the court that was paid to him, great hardness and severity crept into his character along with his ambition, there was no such moderation as would become a popular leader, either in his reward or punishment. But the prizes he awarded to his friends and allies were responsible lordship over cities and absolute sovereignties, while the sole punishment that could satisfy his wrath was the death of his enemy. Not even exile was allowed. Lacedaemonians paid little heed to the rest of his accusers, but when Pharnabazus, who was outraged by Lysander's pillaging and wasting his territory, sent men to Sparta to denounce him, the Athars were incensed, and when they were found Thorax, one of the Lysander's friends and fellow generals, with money in his private possession, they would put him to death and send a dispatch scroll to Lysander ordering him home.
Okay, so now people are trying to discredit him. This is the Parnabazus II, the ruler of Hellespont, Phrygia. I also have a little map to understand at this point. This is the territory that that Pharnabazus rules, and so we see Pharnabazus. He was a Persian soldier and statesman. and satrap of this Hellespontine Phrygia. That's the name of this territory. Initially, he fought with Spartans against Athenians during the Peloponnesian War, but in 404, when it was finished, he also known to be responsible for assassination of Athenian general Alcibiades, who was taking refuge in the Achaemenid Empire. And the assassination was probably at the instigation of the Spartans, and specifically Lysander. You remember that Alcibiades lived on the Chersonesus, right, somewhere here. He had his own thing. So as Alcibiades, and that's how the assassination happened, that as Alcibiades was about to set out for the Persian court, his residence was surrounded and set on fire. Seeing no chance of escape, he rushed out on his assassins, dagger in hand, and was killed by a shower of arrows. I actually have this draw. It's a picture that describing this event that of the assassination of Alcibiades in his house. So Pharnabazus also, he was here, by the way, is also known that he helping Bithynians are in this area against the plundering raids of Greek 10,000 who were returning from their failed campaign in the center of Achaemenid Empire. So you remember that when this battle happened somewhere here, then they had to go up to the Black Sea and then returning to the Byzantium. Some of them were in the fleet. So, but they were, the remnants of them, of that 10,000 that Xenophon was leading. They were certainly were raiding all the villages and harassing population. They needed food, obviously. So he was the one who was kind of defending the population there. And he actually tried to stop them entering his domain, Hellespontine Phrygia. And his cavalry is said to have killed about 500 Greek mercenaries on that occasion and mounted several raids on the Greek mercenaries. Also, Pharnabazus was arranged with Spartan admiral Anaxibius for the rest of the Greek mercenaries to be shipped out of the Asian continent to Byzantium. So after a while, he figured that instead of fighting them, it's easier to just give them a fleet and transport them to the Byzantium here, and from there they walk to their land. So that's the Pharnabazus, the satrap of Hellespontine Phrygia, and his involvement in the assassination. But he played to the Spartans, so that happened in 404. Okay, so now let's go and see what happens to Lysander now, because there is also excuse me, an interesting development happening now, because there is another famous Spartan hero comes to play, Agesilaus. So okay, now let's see how he deals with this. All right, let me read it, this one. But Lysander, when the dispatch scroll reached him at the Hellespont, was much disturbed, and since he feared the denunciation of Pharnabazus above all others, he hastened to hold a conference with him, hoping to compose this quarrel. At this conference, he begged Pharnabazus to write another letter about him to the magistrates, stating that he had not been wronged at all and had no complaints to make. But in this, playing the Cretan against Cretan, that's the saying, as the saying is, he misjudged his opponent. For Pharnabazus, after promising to do all that he desired, openly wrote such a letter as Lysander demanded, but secretly kept another by him already written. And when it came to putting on the seals, he exchanged the document, which looked exactly alike, and gave him the letter which had been secretly written. Accordingly, when Lysander arrived in Sparta and went, as the custom is, to the Senate house and gave the ephors the letter of Pharnabazus, convinced that the greatest of the complaints against him was thus removed. You know, I don't have it here, but it says, but the ephors, after reading the letter, showed it to him, and he understood what was in the letter. It was, Odysseus then is not the only man of guile. For the time being, he was mightily confounded by this and went away. Now, that's the story. But it seems that nothing bad came out for him, because I mean, he is a man at this point. He is a celebrated general. He is one of the greatest figures in Sparta. And let's now go and see what happens next, because we're already approaching the end. Okay, who wants to volunteer reading this one?
I can read it.
Okay.
After he had with great difficulty procured his release from the force, he set sail. But the kings, when he had gone abroad, became aware by that means of the societies which he had formed. He had the cities entirely in his power and was master of Hellas. They therefore took measures for deposing his friends everywhere and restoring the management of affairs to the people. However, fresh disturbances broke out in connection with these changes. And first of them, the Athenians from Phyle attacked the 30 and overpowered them. Lysander therefore came home in haste and persuaded the Lacedaemonians to aid the oligarch and chastise the democracies. Accordingly, they sent to the 30, first of all, 100 talents for the war, and Lysander himself as general. But the kings were jealous of him and feared to let him capture Athens a second time. They therefore determined that one of them should go out with the army. And Pausanias did go out, ostensibly in behalf of the tyrants against the people, but really to put a stop to the war, in order that Lysander might not again become master of Athens through the efforts of his friends. This object then was easily accomplished, and by reconciling the Athenians and putting a stop to their discord, they robbed Lysander of his ambitious hopes.
So what happened here, really, that the power of 30 tyrants that Lysander established after demolishing the walls, and it lasted approximately 8 months, and then there was a revolt. They were taken out and democracy was restored. Now Lysander wanted to go back and put 30 tyrants back. However, as you could see, the kings, we're talking about two Spartan kings, they were concerned about his rising power because he becoming, and they didn't want him to become a master of Athens again. So they kind of like circumvent his efforts, and Pausanias went with him and he negotiated with the Athenians, and he like left democracy in there. So they kind of like put him a little bit on a burner. By the way, the file where they say from where the uprising came to take out 30 tyrants, there is a city between Thebes and Athens called Phyle, and it was used for the supplies of arms for that revolt, and Thebes actually supported Athens in that effort. Okay. Now, another one. Anybody, any volunteers? So this is where Agesilaus comes to play.
Take it.
Okay.
When Agis the king died, leaving a brother, Agesilaus, and a reputed son, Leontichides, Lysander, who had been a lover of Agesilaus, persuaded him to lay claim to the kingdom on the ground that he was a genuine descendant of Heracles. Leontichides was accused of being a son of Alcibiades, who had secret commerce with Timea, the wife of Agis, while he was living in exile at Export. Now, Agis, as they tell us, being convinced by a computation of time that his wife had not conceived by him, ignored Leotychides and manifestly repudiated him up to the last. But when he was carried sick to Heraea and was about to die, he yielded to the entreaties of the young man himself and of his friends, and declared in the hearing of many that Leotychides was his own son. And after begging those who were present to bear witness of this to the Lacedaemonians, died. Accordingly, they did so bear witness in favor of Leotychides. Lysander declared that Diopathes did not interpret the prophecy correctly, for it did not mean that the god would be displeased if one who was lame should rule the Lacedaemonians, but the kingdom would be maimed if bastards and ill-born men should be kings in a line with the posterity of Heracles. By such arguments, and because he had very great influence, he prevailed, and Agesilaus became king.
So you see that, by the way, the reference to the lame, Agesilaus was lame, and that's why he is making that reference. So he had a lot of weight, and he put his weight, political weight, for Agesilaus, and they were lovers, very interesting. And as a result of his interference, the son of not the son of Agis, but Agis's brother, Agesilaus, became king. And again, there is a references that, if you remember, Alcibiades seduced Agis's wife, and that's why he had to escape from Sparta, and that's why the son was, everybody thought that it was Alcibiades' son. Okay, so this is Agesilaus. It's really the great king of Sparta. He actually have done a lot of things later on. You see, he was king of Sparta for almost 40 years. Generally considered the most important king in the history of Sparta. And by the way, there is a Plutarch also wrote his life as well. Okay, so anybody wants to read this one? Okay, I'll read it. Upon this, he was sent as an ambassador to Hellespont. And though he was angry with Agesilaus, he did not neglect to do his duty. Lysander kind of quarreled with Agesilaus before that. But he induced Spithridates, the Persian, a high-minded man with forces at his command, to revolt from Pharnabazus, the satrap of Phrygia, with whom he was at odds, and brought him to Agesilaus. The king made no further use of Lysander. However, in war, and when his time had expired, he sailed back to Sparta without honor. not only enraged at Agesilaus, but hating the whole form of government more than ever, and resolved to put the execution at once and without delay the plans for revolutionary change, which he is thought to have devised and concocted some time before. They were as follows. Well, I just want to mention what he means is that Agesilaus, even though Lysander helped him to be a king, once he became a king, he was jealous of his fame. So he kept him around, but he never gave him any the role of true leadership. He now conducted the war by himself, and Lysander at this point was kept around Agesilaus and playing minor roles. So he was really enraged by this, and he decided to make a revolution as a result of it. So, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to make a major changes in Sparta. So of the Heraclides, which is the descendant of Hercules, who united with Dorians and came down into Peloponnesus, there was a numerous and glorious stock flourishing in Sparta. However, not every family belonging to it participated in the royal succession, but the kings were chosen from 2 houses only, and they were called Eurypontidae and Agidae. The rest had no special privileges in the government because of their high birth, but the honors which result from the superior excellence lay open to all who had power and ability. Now Lysander belonged to one of these families, and when he had risen to great fame for his deeds and had acquired many friends and great power, he was vexed to see that city increased in power by his effort, but ruled by others who were of no better birth than himself. He therefore planned to take government away from the 2 houses and restore it to all Heraclidae in common, or as some say, not to Heraclidae, but to the Spartans in general, in order that its high prerogatives might not belong to those only who were descended from Heracles, but to those who, like Heracles, were selected for superior excellence, since it was this which raised him to divine honors. And he hoped that when the kingdom was awarded on that principle, no Spartan would be chosen before himself. So now he really wanted to overthrow this ancient rule that there are only 2 houses that produce the kings. That's a reference to the rule of the Spartans, and he wanted to extend it to all Spartans based on their merit. And since he thought that he would be the first man, he by these reforms would put himself in power. So he organized this elaborate plot, and it was kind of dependent on a boy who was supposed to bring some information, but the boy died prematurely, ruined the whole plan. And now Lysander was sent on a war with Thebes, having grudge against them for refusing to help him against Athens to restore tyranny of 30 and supplying arms to Athens. You remember when he went, Thebes helped Athens, supplied arms to overthrow 30. So he had grudge against them. His plan to do this revolution, these reforms failed, and now he was sent on military action against Thebes. Okay. Any volunteers for this?
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you.
So this is Lysander, I guess. And since he was now of an altogether harsh disposition, owing to the melancholy which persisted into his old age, he stirred up the ephors and persuaded them to fit out an expedition against the Thebans. And assuming the command, he set out on the campaign. Afterwards, the ephors sent out Pausanias, the king, also with an army. Now, it was the plan that Pausanias should make a circuit by the way of Mount Cithaeron and then invade Boeotia, while Lysander marched through Phocis to meet him with a large force. Then he sent a letter to Pausanias, bidding him move from Plataea and join forces with him at Haliartus, and promising that he himself would be before the walls of Haliartus at break of day. This letter was brought to Thebes by some scouts, into whose hands its bearer fell. The Thebans therefore entrusted their city to a force of Athenians, which had come to their aid, while they themselves set out early in the night and succeeded in reaching Haliartus a little before Lysander, and a considerable part of them entered the city. Lysander at first decided to post his army on a hill and wait for Pausanias. Then, as the day advanced, being unable to remain inactive, he took his arms, encouraged his allies, and led them along the road in column toward the walls of the city. But those of the Thebans who had remained outside, taking the city on their left, advanced upon the rear of their army at the spring called Sisusa.
Okay, so now this is the area, so you would understand, and I want to orient you. You see, this is the Athens, this is the Corinthian Gulf, this part is the Peloponnesus, this is the Isthmus, and now we're going into Boeotia. This is the Thebes. This is the city of Haliartus, so Lysander was advancing, he crossed the Corinthian Gulf, and he was advancing from, he was where am I? Just one the other one. So he was advancing from here and towards the Haliartus, and he sent a letter to Pausani, who was in Plataea right here. So the Pausani would go to Haliartus here, so they would come from both sides. But as we learn here, Pausani never got his letter, right? The Thebans got it, right? And they came and they captured the Haliartus. So so he is somewhere here waiting for Pausani to come, but then eventually he figured, screw it, I'm gonna just take him again. And what happened is he goes into the city, but there is a force of Thebans that is behind him somewhere here that follows him unobserved, follows his army as he approaching Haliartus city. He is unaware that the city is already taken by Thebes. By Thebans, he is unaware of this, and now that leads to disaster. But do anybody have any questions here? Any comments? Just want to make sure you're any ideas. You see, this is Euboea, this is the Boeotia that we're describing this thing. Okay, all right. So now let's go and see what's happened now. Okay. Okay. Who is anybody? Volunteer?
Okay, I will read it. But the Thebans inside the city, drawn up in a battle array with the Haliarthans, kept quiet for some time. When, however, they saw Lysander with his foremost troops approaching the wall, they suddenly threw open the gate and fell upon them, and killed Lysander himself with his soothsayer and a few of the rest. For the greater part of them fled swiftly back to the main body. And when the Thebans made no halt, but pressed hard upon them, the whole force turned to the hills in flight, and 1,000 of them were slain. Tidings of the disaster were brought to Pausanias while he was on the march from Plataea to Thespaia, and putting his army in battle array, he came to Haliartus. Thrasybulus also came from Thebes, leading his Athenians, but when Pausanias was minded to ask for the bodies of the dead under the truth, the elders of the Spartans could not brook it and were angry among themselves. And coming to the king, they protested that the body of Lysander must not be taken up under cover of a truce, but by force of arms, an open battle for it. And that if they conquered, would then give him a burial, but if they were vanquished, it would be a glorious thing to lie dead with their general. Such were the words of the elders, but Pausanias saw that it would be a difficult matter to conquer the Thebans, flushed as they were with victory, and the body of Lysander lay near the walls, so that its recovery would be difficult without a truce, even if they were victorious. He therefore sent a herald, and after making a truce, led his force back. And as soon as they had come beyond the boundary of Boeotia with Lysander's body, they buried it in the friendly soil of their allies, the Peloponnesians, where his monument now stands, by the road leading from Delphi to Chaeronea.
Yeah. So let me see. There is another paragraph here, but just again. So you see this is the road leading to Chaeronea from Haliartus. So again, if you recall, so he was here. As we said, Pausanias was going from Plataea to Thespia, in order to get to Haliartus, but he was far away, and Lysander was killed by the surprise. So that's the description. This is the okay. Now let's read the last paragraph. It's kind of okay. I guess I'll read it. It's a small one. Now that Lysander had met with such an end, at the onset, the Spartans were so indignant about it that they summoned the king to trial for his life, but he evaded it and fled to Tegea, where he spent the end of his days as a suppliant in the sanctuary of Athena. For the poverty of Lysander, which was discovered at his death, made his excellence more apparent to all, since from the vast wealth and power in his hands, and from the greatest homage paid to him by the cities and the great king, he had not even in the slightest degree sought to amass money for the aggrandizement of his family. This is kind of like his last, this is his legacy, that he was an honorable man, incorruptible man, was not searching for the wealth through his victories. Okay.
Great king is the king of Persia?
No, at this point it's probably Pausanias who because he played this role. They wanted to sue him, so he actually ran to the sanctuary.
I think he probably is talking about the king of Persia.
You think so?
I would think so, yeah.
No
one else is called the great king.
Yeah, well, let me see.
The other stuff that Lysander did.
But you see the last one. Where do you see great king?
Second line from the bottom.
Onset of Sparta was so enlightened, but that they summoned the king.
Okay, that's the king of Sparta.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
no, I'm
that's
talking
what-
about where it says great king in the last sentence.
Second to last
Oh,
line.
okay. You see, because I thought you were talking about this,
Oh,
no.
no,
and
no.
that's what I mean. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, that
All
was
right.
right. Yeah, I think we're both on the same page.
Now, the
All
king
right.
of Sparta at this point was Agesilaus? Who?
Yes,
One of
Agesilaus
two.
and Pausanias. There were two kings in Sparta always. Agesilaus was from the house of Agedai, and Pausanias was from the house of Philippidae or something. I forgot exactly the pronunciation of that. So there were two kings. So Pausanias was the second one. Agesilaus is still a king, and as we know, the greatest king of Sparta.
One thing that Plutarch says, and it happens repeatedly, is that when Lysander is going around after the defeat of Athens, and he's going from city to city to city, he says that he would come in, and the people that he had actually put there as tyrants, he would denounce. And he would tell all the Democrats that he was their friend and they could come back and they wouldn't be harmed, so they wouldn't flee. And then when they were all there, he killed them all. And then go on to the next city. So he'd sucker the Democrats in with promises and a little play acting of being angry at his allies. And then over his word, and Plutarch makes it clear that he was seen as a liar. And they say, a Cretan to a Cretan, that means a liar to a liar. And the comment about Odysseus also is saying that he had the reputation of being a liar. So his integrity in Sparta was different from his sense of honor in his dealings with the greater world.
Yeah. Well, so this is the the whole story. I think it's quite a colorful character, and outside of reading this story, like all of these details about the last battle of the Peloponnesian War, through his machinations, through his things, he wanted to make a revolt in Sparta. He put Agesilaus at power, and how he actually ended his life. I think this is pretty interesting life. I mean, so few people realize that at the end of the Peloponnesian War, he was the ruler. He was the number one person. He was probably had more weight than the kings. Still he was subject to the laws of Sparta, because ephors, they are the ultimate judges. Yeah, so
The
that's
Spartan system is kind of bizarre. I don't fully understand it, but the difference in the powers of the ephors versus the king. But the king was less powerful than the ephors.
Yeah, ephors could sanction the kings. Yeah, ephors were ultimate power. And I forgot, it was like 6 or 8 of them. I mean, they were from the leading families. Yeah, it's like a Supreme Court, something like that. It's
But when
pretty
they wanted
interesting.
it, right, they can bypass it. Like Leonidas just during the festival just basically left. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take my 300 fighters and I'm gonna go. And
Yeah, but it didn't bypass ephors. Ephors are enforcing the law. He didn't violate any law. He bypassed the law that they couldn't participate in the war because of some holidays, because of some religious holidays. They couldn't, and that's why he only took his own personal guard, and some allies joined in. But he was not in violation of any laws. So
I
it's
don't know. I mean, wouldn't the religious law be a little bit of state laws as well? I mean, Oracle says this, Oracle says that, and that's it.
no, they said that they could not send the army. They could not
Correct.
send the army. So, but
Right.
it was not the army. It was just his personal guard. He is free to do whatever he wanted.
And he was a
with his-
he was a co-king, right? He was not
He
just a
was,
king. He was a co-king. Yeah.
of course, there are always two kings there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was just one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, the Spartans were famously superstitious, and or pious, depending on how you look at it.
Mhm.
But they were famous for, having all sorts of reasons why, religious reasons why they couldn't do this or that.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Well,
this
and
is the
all
time
the,
of the like after the end of the war. This is the time of the Spartan highest ascendants. They are the only dominant force in Greece. They control everything. It didn't last for too long. I mean, but it lasted until the Battle of Leptra in 371. So like 30 years. They were the
Well,
dominant
it had
force.
been falling for a while before Electra, right? Thebans
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah, yeah.
succeeded in driving out the Spartan
Right,
garrison,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, they started to wane. Yeah,
yeah.
but still, that was kind of like the turning point. They lost their prestige.
Yeah, well, that
That
was
was
it.
it.
That was actually their total defeat.
Yeah, yeah, they lost it. But they were prior to that between 404 and after this last battle and almost to this like loss, like 30 more than 30 years past. They're rulers. They are dominant force. But the main thing is that they basically created the problem that led for the Alexander or Philip and Alexander invasion of Greece, because they ceded Ionia to Persians. That was their agreement. That's why Persians supported them in the Peloponnesian War, because they ceded them Anatolian Greek city states in Anatolia. That's but for that they got the dominance in Greece. Okay.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, thanks, Greg. And mentioning Alcibiades, he's an interesting cat, so to speak. He was, especially in the beginning. I mean, he was a beautiful Adonis, right? Everybody wanted to be Alcibiades. Everybody wanted to be him. He was like those Sakis man, the days, most interesting man, most beautiful man. And then there was a point in life when because he was so beautiful, all of the older statements wanted to be with him, right? Wanted to, so to speak, screw him. So, and at one point, there was this a moment where one of the governors in the city, wanted him so badly, and he was courting him, and he would deny him, deny him, deny him, and then it got to the point where Alcibiades couldn't run anymore, and ended up coming to his house and undressed himself. Was like, just take me. And and it's just the whole paradigm of the Greek life. Like, it, even a strong person like that, as with the most influence, couldn't do anything about, toward the advances, male to male advances in that regard. So,
Yeah, I'm sure he was into that. But in Symposium, Plato writes that it was him who was courting Socrates and wanted to have intimate relationship. And the Socrates is the one who basically puts forward the principles of what we now call Platonic love. That it doesn't have to be sensual, it doesn't have to be sexual, but it's a special friendship. It's a perfect friendship, and that's what. So in a way, I mean, he admired Socrates, and that's what this about. And from this affair, basically the idea of Platonic love came out.
yeah.
From the
So
affair between Socrates and Alcibiades.
We know all too well, right? You're dating a girl for a while, and she's like, I just want to have a platonic love. I'm joking. So anyway, I just want to thank you, Greg. This was a really good presentation, incredible. and with a lot of maps, explanations. A lot of people, participated by reading the text and ending the offer their opinion. Thanks for Paul for all the fruitful additions. So just wanted to go over the schedule. There's a lot of presentation this week, but I don't know, I'm kind of overwhelmed because I'm doing two of them. Tomorrow is we're doing archaeology and a Bible, so I would like to have a lot of input. I'm going to talk about certain artifacts, and I'm going to talk about the Exodus effect, of Moisei, so to speak. It's how Russians we call it, and that had it happened, had it not happened, what was pro, against, type of thing. So a lot of the stuff will be probably just a hearsay or things that archaeologically cannot be proven. So I'd like to have people to, after I talk about artifact, what is it all about, to maybe have a discussion, and then I have Macedonian First War, famous Philip, so we'll discuss that. And I already touched on Antiochus, so that happened prior to that. So it's interesting to put the parallels in that regard. And both of them obviously went to Asia Minor, so that's interesting to figure out. And then on Sunday we have Jane talking about was King Arthur the real figure or not? So so Queen Jane is going to talk about King Arthur. So we'll understand that a little bit further. Some people talk about Rome has something to do with it. There was a Roman outpost, and King Arthur is a Roman figure. Some say no, and we'll figure it out, I guess, in that regard. And just like Spartacus, was it real? Was it not? Well, at some point we'll figure it out as well. Some historians say it never happened, but I don't know. So with that, see you guys tomorrow if you join. So bring discussion hats. There won't be a lot of presentation, more of a discussion, and we won't touch on a religious, pro or against. It would be just facts are going to be presented, and we'll decide to break even. And then, like I said, Macedonian War, and then Sunday we do that King Arthur, and then always on Tuesdays we're doing the next Tuesday we're doing Richard continuing. He's going to talk about Ilkhanat, and he's going to go back to those Seljuks, and so it'll be an interesting one. And then I don't remember what else we have next week. We have a couple. We're doing Islam series, right? Islam 101, Sharia law, and women in Islam. So that's going to follow in November. So do join for some interesting stuff. So I want to wish everybody a nice evening, and see you when I see you guys.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.